Japan just chose Canada. Not America, not Europe. Canada. Their brand new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, won the largest election landslide in Japan's post-war history. Every world leader wanted to be the first through her door. She chose Mark Carney. A military band played "O Canada" inside her official residence in Tokyo. Carney addressed her in Japanese. The room erupted. Everyone believed Canada had one option: sell south. Be grateful. Accept the 51st state label. They were utterly wrong. In 10 days, Carney signed deals on 3 continents: a $2.6 billion uranium contract with India, a comprehensive strategic partnership with Japan, Australia joining Canada's G7 Critical Minerals Alliance. He addressed the Australian Parliament, the first Canadian Prime Minister to do so in nearly 20 years. Here's what the media isn't connecting. Japanese automakers now build 77% of every car manufactured in Canada. That number was 44% in 2016. American automakers left under pressure from Washington. Japan filled every single gap. Canada replaced the United States as Japan's #1 supplier of wheat and pork. 10% of everything Japan eats now comes from Canadian soil. If you want to stay ahead of this story, subscribe and hit the bell. We cover this daily. Now let me show you what actually happened, because the details are extraordinary. Let me break this down because the details matter. India came first. Carney landed in Mumbai, then flew to New Delhi for a meeting with Narendra Modi at Hyderabad House. The two leaders announced 10 commercial agreements worth $5.5 billion total. But one deal stood above everything else. Saskatchewan-based Cameco will supply 22 million pounds of uranium to India from 2027 to 2035. That contract alone is worth $2.6 billion. India has 24 nuclear reactors running right now. Dozens more are planned. Canada sits on one of the largest high-grade uranium reserves on the planet. India did not choose Canada as a favor. India chose Canada because Canada has what India cannot get anywhere else. Modi stood beside Carney and publicly credited him for the turnaround. The leader of 1.4 billion people thanking the leader of the country Trump calls the 51st state. Now understand why Carney is uniquely positioned to pull this off. He is the only world leader alive who has run 2 G7 central banks: Bank of Canada, Bank of England. He managed the 2008 financial crisis. He rebuilt global financial architecture. And when he walks into a room with Modi or Takaichi, they are not meeting a politician. They are meeting someone who has sat across the table from them before in rooms where real decisions get made. While Trump was threatening 100% tariffs, Carney was signing deals worth billions. And this is where it gets really interesting. Here's where it gets fascinating. Do you see what's happening here? Australia welcomed Carney with a 19-gun salute. He met Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the full Australian cabinet, a rare occurrence. Then he addressed their parliament. Every single one of Australia's 226 MPs and senators attended. The first Canadian Prime Minister to receive that platform in nearly 2 decades. But the Parliament address was not the point. The signing was the point. Canada and Australia control roughly 1/3 of the world's lithium, uranium, and iron ore. Those minerals power cell phones, electric vehicles, advanced batteries. Carney announced that Australia is now joining Canada's G7 Critical Minerals Alliance, the largest grouping of trusted democratic mineral reserves on the planet. Then he laid out the architecture: Canada, Australia, Europe, Japan, South Korea. Their combined GDP is larger than the United States, larger than America. Now connect that to what I showed you earlier. Japan signed a comprehensive strategic partnership covering defense, energy, critical minerals, trade, and technology. Japan is considering joining Canada's annual Arctic sovereignty exercise. Japanese forces training alongside Canadian military in the Canadian Arctic. Critics argue these are just symbolic agreements without binding commitments. The data says otherwise. Canada's exports to America fell 5.8% last year. Exports to the rest of the world rose 17.2%, all-time record. America's share of Canadian trade dropped to 71.7%, the lowest since before free trade existed. Is this the end of American dominance in Canadian trade, or will the customer review in July reverse everything? Drop your answer in the comments. But here's the part that should make every Canadian pay attention. Let me show you what this cost the United States. American automakers walked out of Canada under pressure from Washington. Trump demanded they repatriate jobs. But here's what actually happened. In 2016, 4 manufacturers each built more than 400,000 cars a year in Ontario. By 2025, only Honda and Toyota were left doing that. Japanese automakers now account for 77% of every vehicle assembled in Canada. Assembly employment dropped from 32,700 jobs in 2015 to 23,700 in 2024. But the Japanese companies kept their output stable. They are not afraid of defying an American president. They are not American companies. Japan imports 87% of its energy. Their supply lines are fragile. One disruption and the entire country is exposed. Canada has 7 LNG projects in development. Carney told Takaichi that Canada will double LNG exports by the end of this decade and double again the decade after. Mitsubishi already owns 15% of the LNG Canada terminal in British Columbia. The infrastructure is already built. Let that sink in. India wants Canadian LNG. Japan wants Canadian LNG. Neither country has the domestic supply. Canada does. And the pipelines to the Pacific are coming online, while Washington argues about whether to punish its neighbors. Trade delegations are now scheduled both ways. Japan's Business Federation is coming to Canada. A Team Canada mission is going to Japan. Nearly $40 billion in existing bilateral trade, and both sides just committed to expanding it. These deals do not expire. They are already locked in. Even if tariffs disappear tomorrow, the restructuring has already happened. So, where does this end? The answer is permanent. The end game is clear. The assumption that kept Canada dependent on American trade for generations was simple. You have nowhere else to go. Trump said it explicitly. The 51st state. We do not need Canada. Be grateful. That assumption is now broken. Japan's economy is worth over $5.5 trillion. It is the 4th largest on Earth. They just signed a strategic partnership with Canada because Canada has what Japan needs: energy, food, critical minerals, defense cooperation in the North Pacific, and Japanese companies are not leaving. They are the only major automaker still expanding Canadian production. India needs uranium for its nuclear future. Canada has it. Australia needs a critical minerals partner outside the American orbit. Canada is building that alliance. Europe wants access to the CPTPP. Canada is the bridge. The diversification is already permanent. The trade delegations are scheduled. The uranium contracts run through 2035. The LNG infrastructure is built. The defense exercises are planned. None of this requires American approval. While Washington was demanding Canada accept higher tariffs, Ottawa was signing billion-dollar deals. While Trump was calling Canada the 51st state, Carney was the first leader through Takaichi's door. While the American trade representative was reviewing CUSMA, Canada's trade minister was in Washington playing both sides of the board. Everything I've shown you tonight comes from public reporting, but the conclusions are mine. You decide what it means. If this analysis opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe if you haven't. And our last video covered the Australia deal that cracked the door open for everything you just watched. Link is on screen. Watch it now. This is Voice of Canada.